You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. I want it a little on the sticky side. With a modest kitchen and some standard equipment, you can cook food that you would be proud to serve. There is my shrimp. All you need is a few helpful kitchen techniques, the ability to follow a recipe, a passion for food, and a fascination with cooking. Just follow along the rib cage. That is so good. My name is Dennis. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. Whenever I see the word lamb in a recipe, I immediately take notice because I really enjoy working with lamb, cooking with lamb. I really enjoy eating it. It's a little bit more of a challenge because it has a slightly gamey flavor, unlike beef, which is very mild and therefore far more versatile. But whenever I want to eat red meat or buy red meat, I almost always buy lamb rather than beef because I like it so much better. This recipe came from a restaurant trade journal. If you're not familiar with trade journals, they just go out to businesses. You don't see the magazines on the magazine rack at the grocery store. And this one is a restaurant trade journal. And for example, the advertisements in the magazine are for like walk-in freezers or 55-gallon drums of ketchup or steam tables. Not stuff you typically buy for the home kitchen, right? I like these recipes because they're created by chefs for a restaurant. This particular recipe comes out of a restaurant in New York City. They're almost always guaranteed to work. I've seen recipes published in magazines and cookbooks that should never have been published because no one tested them. But these recipes I know will work. They give me a lot of confidence. And this is for a lamb bolognese sauce. You're familiar with beef bolognese. It's a pasta sauce, Italian pasta sauce with a lot of ground beef in it. Well, this one uses lamb. So that's what excites me, and that's why I want to make this. But first, I have some prep work to do, so let's start making this lamb bolognese sauce. You need one medium onion, that's about 10 ounces or 310 grams, yellow onion. This is a larger one, slightly larger, but yeah, it'll work. Okay. And then the way I chop onions, as I always demonstrate, I do them a little differently than the chefs on TV. I always cut down through. They cut slits and then they cut in toward their fingers. I don't like doing that. That gives me the willies. So I cut down through. I'm going to use, I don't know, a medium chop, I guess, for this. I don't need it too fine, but I don't want it as coarse as I would use in, say, a stew. So I just cut down, not all the way through, but cut down most of the way through, leaving everything attached down toward the root. And then I cut across. I have one medium carrot here. This is about 4 ounces or 113 grams. And I need to dice this up. I'm just going to cut this into like a julienne. Long slivers. Let's see, I think that'll be okay. And one down the middle. And then cut across to get some medium-sized cubes. I'm thinking of these about the size of peas. You know what garden peas look like. And I'm going to do that celery the same way. This has been cleaned and washed, trimmed. I'm going to cut this into long strips. Again, like long julienne. And then cut across into a dice. Like so. And that is my celery. That's done. I have here 2 pounds, which is roughly 900 grams of lamb. I need ground lamb. I buy lamb boneless leg at the warehouse store. They don't even have ground lamb there. So I'm going to grind this up myself in a food processor. But before I do that, I have to chop it up a little bit so it'll work in the food processor. All right, so you see what I'm doing here. This is going to take me a minute to cut all this up. So there is all my lamb cut up, ready for the food processor. And now what I have here is 1 pound, roughly 450 grams of pork. Rather than buying pork, ground up pork, what I did was I buy what they call the boneless country ribs, country style ribs. This is actually pork shoulder that they sell at the warehouse store. It usually comes with a lot of fat on it, which is okay for grilling. But for making a recipe like this, I remove most of the fat. A little bit of fat is going to add some flavor, but I don't want it swimming in fat. I'm going to do about half of my lamb at a time here. Make it a little bit easier for my food processor. Oh, and by the way, people have asked me, where do you buy your food processor? Well, this was a limited edition metal Cuisinart, and it evidently really was a limited edition because I've looked a number of times and have not found it available anywhere. And then one thing I like to do to make cleanup easier is put a little barrier in there before I put my lid on. It keeps the lid clean. And then I just want to reduce this down. I mean, if you've seen ground hamburger, ground beef, you know the texture that you're looking for. I don't want to reduce this down to a paste like a pate. I just want to reduce this down so it looks like a ground beef. Okay, let's see what I've got here. And there's my texture. See, that's like a ground beef. It's not really smooth like a pate, but that'll be fine. So I have my other half to do here, and then I can do the pork. Okay, there's my pork. That should be, yes, that looks beautiful. I can set that aside. Look at that. And there's my pork, nicely ground up in the food processor. So that's the ground meats. I'm going to put these in the refrigerator, and then I'm going to stop because I'm having lunch with a friend today, and I'll get back to this afternoon. I am back from lunch, and I thought I would share with you what my fortune cookie said today. It said, you create your own stage and your audience is awaiting. I guess that's pretty appropriate. Okay, the next thing I need to do is start sauteing those meats to brown them lightly. I've got a large pot here heating on the stove. I'm going to put some pure olive oil in there. I usually call that cooking olive oil. It's not extra virgin olive oil. And then here is my meat. This is the pork. And here is the lamb. There's a lot of meat here, 3 pounds of meat. And then, while this is browning, I'm going to be crushing some garlic in here. I have about 8 cloves of garlic to crush in here. It's a lot of garlic, but this is a pretty big pot of sauce. And this is going to take 5, 6, 7 minutes to get that meat turned and browned. So this is going to be a few minutes. It took a while for the meat to actually start browning because there was a lot of juice in the bottom of this pan, and the meat isn't going to brown until all that juice boils off. So now what I'm going to add is 1 scant teaspoon of red pepper flakes, a teaspoon of oregano flakes. I have here some tomato paste, a good heaping tablespoon of tomato paste, and then I'm going to add 1 cup, which is 237 milliliters of dry red wine. I measured what I had left in that bottle, and I had exactly 1 cup. I want to stir this in. That wine will deglaze the bottom of that pan too, and get the fond, the brown bits up. And I'm going to cook this for just a couple of minutes. See how the bottom of that pan is clean now? That wine lifted all those brown bits up. Okay. I've cooked this for a few minutes now to reduce that wine, and you can see there's no liquid in the bottom of that pan. I've reduced that cup of wine. So now I'm going to add a 28-ounce can, which is roughly 800 grams of, if you can find them, San Marzano tomatoes. And you want to add them with the juice that's in the can. If you're not familiar with San Marzano tomatoes, I try to explain it to someone. It's like here in California, we have wine-growing regions like Napa Valley. The region is known for producing good wine grapes. Well, the San Marzano region of Italy is known for producing a really nicely flavored Roma tomato. But if you don't find them, canned Roma tomatoes should be fine. Okay. At this point, I also want to add my onions and carrot and celery. That's going to really bring that temperature down because those were stored in the refrigerator, so those are cold. So I want to bring this up to a good boil again. I have one more ingredient to add to this pan. I want to add a bay leaf to this pan. Okay, coming up to the boil, so I'm going to reduce my heat down to low. I've got a lid to this pan. This used to be a pressure cooker, a cheap one, and the pressure cooker was made of plastic, so it came apart. I took the regulator was made of plastic. I took the pressure regulator out, so what I basically have is just one vent inside this pan. I'm going to cover this pan and I'm going to let this simmer over low heat for 2 hours, but I'll check it every 30 minutes to see what the moisture looks like. If I have to, I can add some water or some stock to keep it moist. My sauce now has been cooking for 2 hours. I'm taking this off carefully so I don't fog my camera lens. There's my sauce. Very thick meat sauce. I want to show you a trick though. I have to adjust the camera to show it to you though. So let me get that done. If you look under my pot here, you'll see that I've stacked one grate on top of another. That's to keep the pot off the heat so that I can reduce the risk of scorching. Now what I do need to do here is taste this for salt. I know it's going to need salt and pepper, but I do want to taste that. So out comes my red-handled tasting spoon. It goes in my mouth, not the pan. Very good, but that is definitely going to need salt and pepper. So I want to put a good pinch or two of salt in there. Even nutmeg would be good in that. Some freshly ground nutmeg. That's an option. When I work with ground meat like that, I think nutmeg is a nice addition. Let me taste that again. Make sure that's well stirred up. I might as well take this out right now. I don't need this bay leaf in there anymore. Let's see what I got. Very good, but even a little more salt would be good in there. Now at this point, if you wanted to, you could simmer this for an additional 30 minutes with the lid off to thicken that sauce more. I'm going to taste it one more time. That's nice. Still light on the salt, but I don't like things too salty. I don't want it too much thicker than this, so I'm going to turn my heat off, and now I'm going to start to let this cool down. My sauce now is just about finished. I have to put in some fresh basil. I bought some basil at the store, and I've been keeping it in water to keep it fresh. So I need to prep this next. I need about a dozen of these basil leaves. And I'm not going to get anything too fancy. I'm not going to get too fancy with these because it's just a Bolognese. So I don't need to cut this into a chiffonade or chop it much. I'm just going to tear these with my fingers into bits and then put this into my sauce. Oh, the smell of that basil. It just smells so good. Another finishing ingredient I need is some Parmesan cheese. And I need about half a cup, which is about, I think, about 60 grams. I'm going to use my shredder here to get some shredded Parmesan. And then I'll measure off about half a cup. My sauce has been sitting here for about 10 minutes. I'm going to put my basil in there, and the recipe says about 4 tablespoons of butter. I know a lot of restaurants, I've seen it on TV where they like to put butter into things. Something they learned maybe from Julia Child, I don't know. But they do put butter in a lot of sauces and things. It gives it a gloss, it gives it a shine, and it also helps to thicken it up a little bit. And then finally, my half a cup of cheese. I'm going to stir that in. just to get it mixed in. I don't like to work in the cheese too much for fear it's going to melt and become stringy. And that is it. That is my finished lamb Bolognese sauce. What my plans are now is to let this cool down thoroughly. Then I'm going to put it in the refrigerator overnight, and then tomorrow I'm going to cook some pasta and eat it with my Bolognese sauce. So here we are now. This is day 2. Last night I did put that Bolognese sauce in the refrigerator because it's always better the next day anyways. And now I've got a small portion heating up in a small pan on my stove. And I also have water coming up to the boil for the pasta. And last night I was wondering, what kind of pasta do I want to have with this? Rigatoni is common enough, but the most traditional pasta is tagliatelle, which is very much like fettuccine. It's a long, flat noodle. So before I went to bed last night, I made up a small portion of homemade pasta dough. On my website, there is a recipe for pasta from scratch, and you can link to the YouTube video from there. So the thing I want to do right now is roll my pasta. I have my pasta machine set up, cut this into long noodles, and then cook it, and we'll be ready to eat. All right, so I want to flour this lightly and just flatten it out by hand. You don't have to, obviously, make pasta from scratch for this dish. You can buy rigatoni, you can use spaghetti, you can use linguine, you can buy fettuccine in the store and cook it according to package direction. When I can, I like to make pasta from scratch. I think it tastes better. I like the texture better. It cooks a lot more quickly. This will cook in only about a minute. And I think it's fun to make homemade pasta. In fact, when I'm cooking for others, I'll often make the dough in advance, and then I do this step, shape the pasta in front of my dinner guests, because it's always a little exciting and it's fun for them, entertaining, to see their pasta being made from scratch. I'm cutting this into about 3 pieces, about equal pieces. Switch to my cutter here, and I want to flour these well so that it doesn't stick to itself. I keep this is actually a powdered sugar duster, but I keep flour in it and keep it in my cupboard because I do this more often than work with powdered sugar. All right, so I have on my machine, I have a very thin cutter and I have a wider cutter that makes fettuccine tagliatelle. And there's my pasta. That's my noodles. My water is just coming up to the boil. So I'm going to begin cooking this next. And again, this only cooks in about a minute. And then I'll drain it. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Homemade pasta. Then I'll drain it, plate it, and then put sauce on it. All right, here is my pasta now. Drained, cooked, and dressed with a little bit of olive oil. Beautiful. Doesn't that look nice? I love fresh pasta. And then, as I said, this has been heating on the stove, so this is well warmed. Plenty of my lamb Bolognese on top. And then how I like to garnish this is put a little bit of olive oil on there. That's extra virgin olive oil. And then you can garnish this with some freshly grated, this is Parmesan cheese. And there it is, my tagliatelle or fettuccine with lamb Bolognese sauce. The last step, of course, is to see how good this tastes. That looks wonderful. I want to taste my sauce. That is so good. That is delicious. What's funny about this is I know what beef bolognese should taste like. This looks like beef bolognese. Plain going overhead. But like my taste buds are like surprised because it doesn't taste exactly like beef bolognese because it's lamb bolognese. Pasta is cooked al dente, just in time for lunch, so excuse me, I'm going to go enjoy my pasta with lamb Bolognese sauce. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive. I thought I would show you how I put my sauce up in the freezer. Here's my pot of sauce. I made this yesterday. It's cool now. This is my 8-inch impulse heat sealer. I bought this on Amazon.com. This paper, by the way, is just parchment paper. I put that on there just to protect the parts a little bit, make them last longer. This is poly tubing, and I bought this from Uline.com. I buy it in the big, like 2,000 or 3,000 foot roll. It's really big. There's a picture of it on my website in the area for my lazy man meals. To make it easier to work with, I roll smaller rolls of it as I need it. And this is 6-inch poly tubing. According to the catalog, it's approved for use by the USDA and the FDA in the commercial food services industry. You heat seal it shut to make a little bag. This stuff is expensive in the big roll. With shipping, it's over $100, but it'll last 10 years. And these little bags are about 2 pennies each when you calculate the cost. Then, to use it in this case, I like to put it in something to hold my bag open. All right. And then what I have here, I've already been using it. This is a funnel that I cut from the top of a jar of juice. My sauce is thick because it's been in the refrigerator overnight. So I'm going to have to push it down inside, but that actually makes it cleaner to work with. It's not going to run over things and spill down. So there's my sauce in there. And then take the bag out, settle it down a little bit, put it on my heat sealer again, get as much air out as I can, and heat seal it again. Takes a couple of seconds. You can hear it, it clicks when it's done. I can trim this section off. And there's a pouch of my sauce. I store these in the freezer when I make a lot of sauce like this, so that when I need sauce in a hurry, I have a small portion, I can just take it out of the freezer and thaw it.